So this video is about perfect competition. It's a market structure that economists love. Goodness knows why, because it's a theoretical market structure, but it's a really useful market structure to compare real world markets by. It will tend to come up either in section A, the short answer questions where they can ask theoretical stuff, or section C, when perhaps you might be asked to write an essay comparing competition and monopoly. It's unlikely to come up on section B, data response, because it isn't a real world market. We're going to jump right to the conclusion. Under perfect competition, firms are price takers. They cannot change the price, they cannot drop the price, they cannot raise the price. They have to accept the ruling market price. And if we look at the conditions of perfect competition, you can see why that actually occurs. Well, the first condition is there's got to be a lot of small buyers and sellers. How many is a lot? Well, I tend to think of about 100 as being a lot. And they're all so small that none of them can affect the price. And they're all selling exactly the same goods. Those goods are homogeneous. So that doesn't just mean that they're exactly the same. That also means that customers treat them as if they were exactly the same. So you can't have any brand loyalty under perfect competition, because that might favour customers buying one firm over another, and then that firm could raise the price, couldn't it? Now, the third thing about perfect competition is it's got to be relatively easy to get into the market if you can see profits being made elsewhere. And if you don't make a profit, it's got to be relatively straightforward for you to leave the market. So, for example, if you wanted to set up as a window cleaner, the cost of doing that would be relatively low and you could do it fairly easily. Though window cleaning is not a perfect market because the goods are not totally homogeneous, because people might work at different times or different beats or whatever. The fourth condition is that all of the market players must have perfect knowledge of the market. They must know everything. So if you're an entrepreneur or a potential entrepreneur, you know the profits being made by other entrepreneurs, which will tell you whether you want to join the market or not. Similarly, if you're a consumer, you know the prices that are being charged by every single seller, so that if someone does choose to sell slightly cheaper, you would know that and you would go to them, and that would drive the higher priced firm out of business unless they actually adjust their price down as well. Now, those are the four biggies. One that I like to tag on to the end, so you get a perfect outcome for society, is there must be no other costs or benefits. So there can be no externalities, or else you're going to get an outcome that is not appropriate for society. Similarly, there can't be any cost involved in actually purchasing the product, and that's one reason why petrol is not in perfect competition. One, there are a few slightly more dominant suppliers. The goods are totally homogeneous. Lead-free is lead-free is lead-free. But if you're going to get petrol, you're going to incur costs in driving to the garage. And that's why, say, on motorways, you'll find that garages charge substantially more than in town sites. So having said that it's a theoretical market structure, there's a couple of markets that sort of cover bits of perfect competition, so economists can look at them and get a partial analysis from there. For example, commodity markets that you often look at when you're doing demand and supply, they're pretty close to perfect competition. Now, a small farmer can't decide what price they're going to sell their rye or cereal or grain or whatever for. Now, my favourite example is the global currency market. So in that market, do you have lots and lots and lots of small buyers and sellers? Well, there are a lot of buyers and sellers. It's a global market. No one firm can completely dominate that market, but there is some suggestion that occasionally firms get together to engage in currency fixing, and particularly countries, if they choose to, might be able to buy or sell huge amounts of currency. So China, for example, runs to a fixed exchange rate, so they use their buying power to make sure that the renminbi is at a certain price, and occasionally the European Central Bank or the Bank of England has done that as well, but by and large that doesn't happen. So yeah, you do have an awful lot of small buyers and sellers. Well, the goods are homogeneous. A pound is a pound is a pound. If you're a foreign currency speculator, you don't care where you buy those pounds from. You can buy them from the National Banque de Paris, you can buy them from the NatWest Bank, you can buy them from an American bank. You really don't care. You have no brand loyalty whatsoever as to where you get those pounds from. Freedom of entry and exit, slightly more dodgy. Some of my students have actually become currency dealers while they've been students. They've set up on a pretty small scale, but you find it quite difficult to set up on a scale, say, to compete with someone like Barclays. So I would say sort of, maybe not. As for perfect knowledge, absolutely. If you're a foreign currency buyer or seller, you're going to have a screen in front of you, and that will have on it the prices being charged by an awful lot of other sellers or buyers in that market. And all you've got to do is lean across and touch the one that you find cheapest or more expensive if you're planning to sell to them. And you can instantly get that trade. So not only have you got perfect knowledge, but you've got very, very low cost. It's just literally the cost of picking up your finger and putting it onto a different seller. So all of that means that you have to accept the ruling market price. If you charged even 1p more than your rivals, nobody would buy from you. They have no brand loyalty whatsoever. So why don't you go the other way, selling for 1 penny cheaper than all your rivals? Because you would sell out instantly, and you could have sold exactly the same quantity at the higher price, so you would not be profit maximizing. So our table is pretty straightforward. If, for example, the market price is £20, then you can sell whatever quantity you like at £20. Your total revenue is the 20 times table, and your marginal revenue, that's the extra revenue from selling an extra unit, is £20. It's exactly the same as the price or average revenue. So effectively, we have a table where the average revenue and the marginal revenue columns are exactly the same, and the total revenue column is just a times table. So how do we recognize a perfectly competitive market? By looking at the total revenue curve. Well, it's a straight line from the origin, because every single time we sell another unit, our total revenue goes up, in this case by 20 quid. The diagram on the right hand side is the one that you need to learn for perfect competition in the short run. The diagram on the left hand side shows the market as a whole, where the supply curve cuts the demand curve. That is the ruling market price. So you simply copy that price along to the diagram on the right hand side, the cost and revenue diagram. Because the firm has to accept that price, you've got a perfectly flat AR, MR and demand curve, where the elasticity of demand is infinity. So all we are doing is we are copying across the ruling market price. Often, if you're trying to do a multi-choice question, you don't want the diagram on the left hand side, but you do want the diagram on the right hand side. Now, if we can briefly digress and look at efficiency in the short run, well, the profit maximizer is going to be producing where MC equals MR. That's always the condition for profit maximization, no matter what the market structure. And on this particular occasion, MR is exactly the same as AR. Now, the conditions for allocative efficiency is marginal cost equals average revenue. So if MR is the same as AR, then profit max must be allocatively efficient. On the other hand, for productive efficiency, we're looking where MC equals AC, the bottom part of the AC curve. And you can see on our diagram there, we're at quantity Q. We are not at the bottom part of the AC curve. Therefore, we are not efficient in the short run if we're making a profit or a loss. So what about the profit position? Well, profit is always the difference between the averages. So if we produce where MC equals MR, then the profit is going to be the difference between the AR and AC curves, which is that golden area that I've labelled on the diagram. So why short run? Well, we just labelled a lovely golden profit curve. Firms are making profits. Now, because there's perfect knowledge, other firms or potential firms know this, and they're going to want some of that. So they want to join the market. And of course, because of low barriers to entry, they can join the market. So once they've joined the market, industry supply goes up. When supply goes up, price goes down. And that price is going to fall until the marginal firm is just making normal profits, because that will not attract any new firms into the market. Again, it's the diagram on the right hand side that you need most often. If you're doing a more detailed analysis, you might want to incorporate both diagrams. So on the left hand side, the market has increased as the supply curve goes from S to S1. That drives down the price until the AC curve is just sitting on the AR curve, which means that your supernormal profits have been competed away. Now, the beauteous thing about perfect competition is that in the long run, we don't only have allocative efficiency, but we also have productive efficiency, and that is why it's known as a perfect market.